At 2:13 a.m., Lily Hassan stood under the buzzing fluorescent panel outside St. Jude's emergency intake office and pressed her thumbnail into the corner of a red envelope until the paper warped. Final notice was stamped across it in block letters that looked almost oily under the light. And below it, her landlord's office had circled the amount due in thick black marker, as if shame needed to be legible from across a room. She opened her wallet anyway, counted twice, then once more because exhaustion made numbers slippery. $47, 2 fives, 7 singles, 3 quarters, a dime, and 2 nickels that had left green marks on the lining. Her coffee had gone cold an hour earlier, but she kept the paper cup between both hands for heat, while her damp scrub top clung to her spine beneath a thrift store coat that still smelled faintly of mothballs and hospital sanitizer. The intake printer behind her kept spitting forms she had translated all night. English to Arabic and back again, insurance terms to frightened families, consent language to people shaking too hard to hold a pen. She had worked 12 hours before sunset at the pediatric desk, then another 6 in the ER overflow, because 2 interpreters called out sick and no one else could cover Levantine dialects without mistakes that might become lawsuits. Her left calf cramped each time she shifted her weight. Her contact lenses stung. Somewhere in her bag, under Sammy's medication list and a granola wrapper she forgot to throw away, her phone kept vibrating with alerts she already knew by sound. Pharmacy refill warning, utilities overdue, another automated reminder about his dialysis copay. The month had been consumed 1 receipt at a time, and she could feel the arithmetic closing around her like a fist. She signed out at 2:19, her signature drifting lower on the line than usual, and crossed the loading bay while rain came down in cold sheets that turned curb lights into smeared gold. The overnight bus stop was 3 blocks east, but the app on her phone showed 91 minutes to home, and then another 42 to Lower Manhattan. She did not have 133 spare minutes. Marcelli Tower had asked for temporary translation support on an overnight private security review. Cash premium plus transport stipend. Payment in 48 hours, according to the message forwarded by a staffing coordinator who never used punctuation. Lily had accepted before she could think through what private security review might mean inside a building known for armored sedans and men who never raised their voices because they did not have to. She booked the cheapest rideshare option and watched surge pricing jump anyway. By 2:41, the car dropped her at the edge of Broad Street, where rainwater streamed along the gutters and black sedans idled under the tower's overhang in a line so polished they reflected the gold-lit facade like a second city. The building rose out of the wet pavement in pale stone and glass, every window sealed, every entrance watched. Lily tucked her chin into her coat collar, pushed wet hair from her eyes, and crossed through the revolving door with her hospital tote bumping her knee. The lobby floor was veined marble, bright enough to hold a perfect mirror image of her scuffed sneakers. A chandelier hung overhead in fractured tiers of crystal that made her feel as if she had entered a place designed to expose cheap fabric and fatigue on contact. Temporary help goes to security processing, the front desk woman said without looking up from her tablet. Her tone stayed neutral and practiced, but the category landed with clean precision. Temporary help, not contractor, not interpreter, not Ms. Hassan. Lily gave her name, slid over her state ID, and watched it disappear into a tray. On the wall behind the desk, a muted screen displayed weather alerts over downtown, and a scrolling market ticker she could not afford to understand. A house manager met her near the private elevator banks, immaculate in a charcoal suit with a silver pin on his lapel. "Phone, please," he said. "Protocol." He offered a black lockbox already labeled with a barcode and a strip of masking tape where someone had written Hassan in block capitals. Lily hesitated only long enough to pull up Sammy's nephrology contact and memorize the direct extension one more time. Then she powered the phone down and set it inside. The lid clicked shut, a tiny mechanical sound, final as a handcuff. "I need to remain reachable for family medical issues," she said, hearing the roughness in her own voice. "There is a landline in the staff corridor," he replied, with supervisor authorization. That was how power lived in buildings like this, she thought. Not in shouting, in access. The elevator climbed without stopping, the digital display counting up through secure levels she had never heard named out loud. Her ears popped near the 40s. She leaned back against brushed steel and tried to slow her breathing. But hunger made her hands tremble, and the smell of rain drying on wool made her slightly nauseated. She had eaten half a banana at 5:10 p.m. and a packet of saltines around midnight while translating triage complaints over a crying toddler's cough. In the elevator mirror, she looked older than 27. There were faint shadows under her eyes and a red pressure mark across the bridge of her nose where her mask had sat too long. At level 52, the doors opened onto a corridor lined with walnut panels and recessed lights, quiet enough that she could hear the soft sweep of her own coat hem. No hospital alarms, no elevator chime from other floors, just controlled silence and the distant hiss of rain against glass. Two security officers stood near a frosted partition, both in tailored black suits with clear earpieces and expressionless faces. One glanced at her visitor badge, then at her tote as if calculating volume and risk in the same moment. "Interpreter?" he asked. "Yes." "Wait by Conference C until called." She followed painted arrows through a side hallway where the flooring changed from marble to muted carpet and then to matte tile. The class contrast was almost theatrical. Crystal and walnut out front, utility doors and industrial vents behind. In the staff kitchenette, she found a vending machine stocked with imported sparkling water and protein bars priced at $9 each. She bought nothing. She sat on a narrow bench outside Conference C, spread the rent notice on her knee, and started writing numbers in the margin with a borrowed pen. Dialysis copay balance, transit, minimum payment on electric. She crossed out one version, wrote another, then circled a third that still ended in red. At 2:58, she used the authorized landline to call the overnight nurse line at Sammy's clinic. She had to punch an internal code first, then wait through 2 transfers. "This is Lily Hassan, sister of Sammy Hassan. Patient ID ending in 2046, she said when a tired voice finally answered. "Any changes from tonight's report?" "No acute issues," the nurse said. Keyboard clicks in the background, distant monitor alarms. Pre-dialysis blood pressure was high, but improved. He asked if you made it to your second job. Lily swallowed hard. "Tell him yes. Tell him I'll be home before school." "Ms. Hassan, we still need the consent update signed by Friday." "I know." A pause, softer now. "We're trying to hold his slot." "Thank you." When she hung up, her hand remained on the receiver for a few seconds longer than necessary, as if warmth might transfer through plastic. Hold his slot. She understood the administrative language beneath that phrase, because she translated it for other families every week. Eligibility review, continuity of care, emergency placement alternatives. Alternatives could mean a temporary state arrangement if a guardian missed too many procedural deadlines. It sat in her chest as a private terror. Never dramatic in its wording, always devastating in its consequences. At 3:11, a valet in rain-darkened livery pushed through the service door with a dolly stacked in gray archive boxes sealed with blue tamper tape. He looked barely older than 19. His right hand shook when he reached for the badge scanner, and when the cuff of his sleeve shifted, Lily saw bruising across 2 knuckles, fresh and mottled purple against pale skin. He noticed her noticing and dropped his gaze immediately. "Rough night?" she asked, gentle, because she knew what humiliation sounded like when wrapped in polite concern. "Long shift," he murmured. He scanned in, maneuvered the dolly toward the interior corridor, and almost clipped the corner because his wrist seemed stiff. No one commented. No one offered help. One of the suited officers watched him pass with flat attention, then returned his focus to the hall camera feed. By 3:24, rain hammered the windows hard enough to erase the city below. The tower felt detached from street life, suspended in weather and money and sealed protocols. Lily rubbed the ache at the base of her throat and read through her assignment brief again. Multilingual transcription support, chain of custody verification, confidentiality penalties in bold. The penalties were larger than her annual income. At 3:31, a staff coordinator in a fitted navy dress appeared with a clipboard and a smile that never reached her eyes. "Ms. Hassan, there may be a delay. Please remain available." "Do you have an estimate?" Lily asked. "Not at this time. My shift at the hospital starts again at noon." The woman's smile stayed fixed. "Noted." When she left, Lily folded the rent notice into quarters and tucked it back into her bag beside Sammy's treatment schedule. Keys, badge, pen. She checked each item twice. The ritual of someone trying to hold control through inventory. Her shoulder throbbed where the tote strap had dug in all night. Hunger sharpened into a hollow burn. She pictured Sammy asleep with his headphones crooked over one ear, one hand curled around the cheap plastic dinosaur he refused to throw away. And she made herself sit straighter on the bench, as if posture could substitute for certainty. At 3:47, footsteps approached from the main corridor, measured and unhurried. A man's voice gave a low instruction she could not make out, followed by the soft, mechanical release of a lock. The walnut door at the end of the hall opened a fraction, then wider, spilling a strip of white light across the tile that stopped at the toes of her wet sneakers. Lily rose before she was told to, every muscle heavy and alert at once, and closed her fingers around the strap of her bag as the night gathered itself for whatever came next. The strip of white widened, and a security officer stepped through first, broad-shouldered, earpiece flashing under recessed light. He scanned the hallway, then tilted his head toward Lily without speaking. The instruction was clear enough. She followed him through the walnut door into a reception area that looked more like a private law firm than a security floor. All smoked glass and low leather chairs. A wall of monitors muted to grayscale feeds of elevators, loading docks, and rain-lashed streets 30 stories below. The air smelled faintly of cedar and expensive coffee. Her wet coat cuffs left dark marks where her fingers brushed the polished edge of a console table. Nobody offered a towel. "Temporary interpreter is here," the officer said to the woman at the desk. The woman did not look up right away. She finished typing, clicked something twice, then raised her eyes to Lily with a professional smile that held no warmth. "You'll wait until Detective Cade is available. Bag on the scanner, please." Lily set her tote on the belt. The machine hummed, then beeped hard. "Open the side pocket." She did. The red final notice envelope sat on top, edges softened from handling. The desk woman lifted it with 2 fingers, read the stamp, and slid it back into the bag without expression. But the pause was long enough to land as deliberate. Lily felt heat rise under her skin anyway. "Personal papers are not prohibited," the woman said, voice dry with policy language. "Keep them contained." Contained. As if debt were loose powder that could contaminate the room. By 3:52, She sat in a low chair that cost more than a month of her rent and tried to flatten the damp hem of her scrub pants with her palms. A tray rested on the table beside her with glass bottles of imported water and silver-wrapped chocolates she could not bring herself to touch. Through the glass partition, she watched suited men move in brief, precise lines, doors opening and closing on coded locks, everyone carrying the kind of urgency that never looked rushed because panic belonged to people without backup. Her stomach clenched hard enough to make her dizzy, hunger sharpening each scent in the room until even the coffee seemed accusatory. A man entered from the interior corridor at 3:56 and changed the rhythm of the space without raising his voice. Mid-30s, tailored charcoal suit, tie knotted with mathematical precision, hair cut close at the sides. He carried a slim tablet under one arm and a smile polished for boardrooms. His gaze flicked across Lily once, cataloging, then settled into something politely attentive. "Ms. Hassan." His voice was smooth, low, urban East Coast, with expensive schooling scraped over the edges. "Detective Darius Cade, Internal Investigations." Lily stood. "Good morning." He glanced at the wall clock. Technically, yes, though for most people this is still night. He offered a hand. His grip was cool, measured, released at exactly the right second. "You've worked at St. Jude's for 4 years, intake and translation support. 3 years and 9 months. A tiny smile. Accurate correction, useful trait. He gestured toward a narrow meeting room off the reception area. Inside, the table was black glass, 2 chairs, a carafe of water sweating rings onto a coaster. The ceiling lights were bright enough to erase shadows. "Please sit." She took the chair nearest the door. Cade remained standing, tapping his tablet awake. Lines of text reflected in the glass between them. She caught her own name, birth year, then a column of numbers that looked like balances. "This isn't an interrogation," he said, still smiling. "Pre-brief, standard protocol before high-sensitivity transcription work." "Understood. Given your background, I assume confidentiality is familiar?" "Yes." "Given your current financial strain, I need explicit confirmation that outside incentives would not influence your judgment tonight." The sentence was formal, almost elegant. The humiliation in it was not subtle. Lily kept her hands folded in her lap so he would not see them tense. "My judgment is professional," she said. "Professional people also have pressure points." He swiped the tablet. "Utilities overdue. Dialysis copays outstanding. Rent arrears at critical notice stage. You can see why I'm thorough." Her throat tightened. "How did you get access to my medical billing information?" "Contractor vetting authorization. Page 6 of your onboarding packet." He slid a paper across the table, signature block highlighted in yellow. Her signature was there, compressed and tired from hours ago. "You're not in trouble, Ms. Hassan. We verify risk. That protects everyone." Everyone. Not families like hers. Institutions like his. He sat at last, posture relaxed but exact. "Mr. Marcelli is conducting a sensitive review tonight. You'll translate and verify language-based inconsistencies in interview statements and manifest notes. No independent copying, no personal records, no deviation from assigned terminal. I need 1 call every 2 hours to check on my brother's clinic line." Cade's expression did not change. "Requests go through me." That wasn't the arrangement with staffing. "You're not with staffing now." He folded his hands. "Do you understand me?" The old instinct to apologize rose automatically, the one that kept paychecks coming and supervisors placated. She swallowed it. "I understand your instruction." "Good." He tapped the table once. "We'll work well together if we keep boundaries clear." Someone passed outside the glass wall. The valet from earlier, shoulders rounded under a too large jacket, pushing a smaller cart now stacked with sealed evidence binders. His right hand still trembled on the handle. One binder slipped crooked. He corrected it quickly without stopping. Cade noticed Lily's glance and closed the interior blind with a flick of his fingers, cutting the hallway from view. "Focus here," he said. The blind snapped down like a curtain at the end of a show she had not agreed to watch. He moved to procedure then, rapid and clipped, making her initial each paragraph. Non-disclosure, chain of custody penalties, immediate termination for unauthorized communication, personal liability for compromised testimony. The numbers attached to each breach were absurdly large. Private bank numbers, designed less as realistic fines and more as reminders of scale. She signed because refusing would mean no payment, and no payment meant the pharmacy wouldn't release Sammy's next refill without a partial deposit she did not have. At 4:07, Cade's desk phone buzzed. He listened for 8 seconds, said, "Hold them in corridor 2, and hung up. A new tension entered his shoulders, subtle but real, one notch sharper in how he straightened his cuffs. "We're delayed," he said. "You'll wait outside interview suite A until called." He stood. So did she. When she reached for her tote, he reached first, lifting it by the strap and weighing it lightly in his hand, as if checking something unspoken. "Paper gets damaged in this humidity," he said, eyes dropping to the corner of the red envelope peeking above Sammy's medication schedule. "Wouldn't want important notices lost." He handed the bag back. His smile remained courteous. His jaw tightened once. A quick muscle jumped near his ear, then smoothed over. He escorted her down a long hallway where the design shifted again, less polished, more fortified. Matte tile replaced carpet. Camera domes sat at each corner. Doors were thicker, set with card readers and metal frames that looked reinforced. The rain struck the windows in harder bursts now, wind pushing water sideways across the glass so the city lights blurred into smeared amber streaks. Somewhere distant, thunder rolled low and long. At Suite A, he stopped outside a sealed walnut door with a narrow vertical pane of one-way glass. No voices came through. No shuffle, no argument, no cough. Just the hum of ventilation and the weather hitting the building. "Wait here," he said. "Do not leave this position unless instructed by me or Mr. Marcelli's direct security." "How long?" "As long as necessary." He turned away before she answered, phone already at his ear, tone dropping to something harder she could not fully catch. She heard fragments as he moved down the corridor. "Not on record. Keep him separated. I said hold." Lily stood with her back near the wall and listened to her own pulse climb. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed faintly. Her shoulder ached where her tote strap had dug in. She shifted weight from one foot to the other and counted breaths, a habit from ER nights when panic had to be managed in silence. 2 guards took position 10 feet away, one on either side of the corridor intersection. Neither spoke to her. One checked his watch 3 times in 5 minutes. The other kept touching the wire behind his ear, pressing it as if the feed were unstable. At 4:16, a soft electronic chirp sounded from behind the walnut door, followed by a dull scrape, heavy and singular, as though a metal case had been dragged once across tile. Then quiet again, complete and dense. Lily stared at the door seam. Her skin prickled along her arms beneath the damp coat lining. Down the hall, the valet appeared again, now empty-handed, walking too fast for someone told to be calm. He slowed when he saw the guards, offered a deferential nod, and kept moving. As he passed Lily, she caught the smell of wet wool and antiseptic, and saw that his cuff had shifted enough to reveal a second bruise higher on his wrist, shaped like 4 blunt crescents. He did not look at her this time. At 4:19, the corridor lights flickered once, barely a blink, then stabilized. One guard muttered, "Backup circuit," into his cuff mic. No one responded aloud. The rain intensified, drumming hard enough now to make the windows vibrate in their frames. Lily hugged her tote tighter against her ribs, then forced her grip to loosen. She was here to translate, to log language, to survive the shift, collect the payment, and get home before Sammy woke for school. That was the plan. Plans felt fragile in this hallway. Footsteps returned, measured and unhurried. Cade came back into view from the far corner, jacket buttoned now, expression composed into that same polished courtesy. Only the fine tension at his mouth gave him away. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see rain dots on his shoulder from some unplanned detour through a loading corridor. "Ms. Hassan," he said, voice pleasant, formal, edged with something colder underneath. "Mr. Marcelli is expecting full cooperation." He keyed open the walnut door and held it for her, and the silence on the other side felt like a hand closing over her throat. The room beyond the walnut door was colder than the corridor, climate-controlled to a sterile chill that raised goose flesh on Lily's damp forearms. A glass wall ran the full left side, clear from floor to ceiling, exposing the interview suite to the bullpen outside where analysts and security staff moved between consoles. No blinds, no privacy film, just bright white light and visibility arranged like a warning. In the center sat a steel table bolted to the tile, 2 chairs on one side, one on the other, and a terminal recessed into the surface with a blinking transcript cursor waiting for input. Cade guided her to the single chair facing the glass. "Sit," he said. She lowered herself carefully, toed at her feet, shoulders still aching from the strap. Through the clear wall, she saw 2 junior staffers pause near a printer, glance toward the room, then look away too quickly. Cade remained standing, tablet in hand, posture relaxed in that practiced way that made his control feel administrative rather than personal. "You'll provide live language verification for this review," he said. "You will not editorialize. You will not ask questions unless asked directly. If I say mark a statement complete, you mark it complete." Lily looked at the terminal. "Where is the speaker feed? There's no active interview channel." "There doesn't need to be one yet." He set a thin folder on the table and slid it toward her with 2 fingers. "We begin with you." The folder opened under her hand to copies of her life arranged as evidence. Utility shut-off notices, pharmacy receipts, Sammy's dialysis billing summaries, school attendance logs with her emergency contact signature. Her rent envelope was there too, flattened and photocopied. Final notice, black and unmistakable. Cade tapped the top page. "Financial motive profile," he said, voice pitched to Carrie. "Contractor demonstrates escalating debt and dependent care burden." Humiliation landed physically, a hard rise of heat up her throat, then a wave of cold. She kept her voice even. "You said this wasn't an interrogation. This is an integrity assessment." He smiled without softening. "Words matter in this building." He touched the panel beside the door. A tone sounded, and the outer hallway speakers came alive with low static. A second later, her own name appeared on the monitor strip mounted outside the glass, visible to anyone crossing the bullpen. "Hassan. L review in progress." Cade sat opposite her at last, crossing one leg over the other with casual precision. "Record begins at 4:23 a.m., he said. "Subject: Lily Hassan. Temporary linguistic contractor. Reason: potential root leak linked to shipment manifest discrepancies." He glanced up. "State your full name for the record." Her pulse thudded in her ears. Lily Amal Hassan. Employment: St. Jude's Hospital Intake and Translation Support. Contract shifts through staffing. Dependents. She hesitated, then answered, because silence could be twisted too. My younger brother. Medical dependency level? That is not relevant to manifest translation. Cade's jaw twitched once. Answer: he receives dialysis. Outside the glass, a man in a gray suit slowed beside the monitor, looked in, and lingered with a cup in his hand. Cade let the moment stretch until Lily felt every second of being watched. Thank you, he said finally. Now, Miss Hassan, are you aware that Marcelli transport routes were leaked within 12 hours of your onboarding packet being processed? No. Are you aware that desperate people are frequently recruited through debt relief offers? I have not leaked anything. He slid 3 printed manifests across the table. Then help me understand these timestamp irregularities you flagged during pre-brief. She blinked at the pages. She had never seen these copies. The departure times were listed in 24-hour format, but 2 entries carried offset metadata tags in a notation she recognized from hospital software migrations, not private logistics systems. A patched field? A manual override. Her fatigue thinned into focus. These notations weren't generated by native dispatch software, she said quietly. They were inserted. Cade leaned back. Careful. I'm answering your question. He drummed once on the tabletop, then raised his voice half a notch, speaking toward the glass as much as to her. Subject is now challenging document authenticity while under review for motive and access. Lily's skin prickled. Public framing. Every phrase positioned before anyone could test it. She drew a breath through the dizziness gathering at the edges of her vision and leaned toward the terminal. Then log my statement exactly, she said. I request translation verification protocol under Compliance Rule 12. Source language integrity check with metadata preservation. For the first time, Cade's expression sharpened. You are not authorized to invoke executive compliance channels. I'm contracted for chain of custody language verification. It's in the brief you had me initial. The words tasted metallic in her dry mouth, but they were true. She had read every clause because penalties could ruin families. Her fingers moved over the terminal keys before he could interrupt, selecting the protocol pathway buried under 2 submenus. The screen prompted for reason code. She entered. Suspected timestamp alteration affecting testimony accuracy. Then she hit enter and watched the system generate a lock icon beside the transcript file. Cade leaned forward, voice dropping. What did you just do? Created a metadata note attached to this session. She kept her eyes on the screen. Auto copy to executive archives when a reviewer alleges evidentiary inconsistency. That function is restricted. Not from this terminal while record is live. A red banner flashed briefly in the top corner. Compliance duplicate queued. Transmission pending network handshake. Cade stood so abruptly, his chair legs scraped tile. Outside the glass, the gray-suited observers straightened and then moved away at speed. Lily's hands began to shake, whether from hunger or adrenaline, she couldn't tell. Delete it, Cade said. I can't, it's locked. Delete the request line. The archive copy has already queued. He braced both palms on the table and bent toward her. Smile gone, breath controlled but edged. You are a temp with overdue rent and a medically dependent minor. Do not test where your leverage ends. Her throat tightened around a surge of fear so fast it almost stole her next breath. Do not talk about my brother. His eyes dropped to her wrist, then to the lock icon still visible on the terminal. "You just made a procedural mistake." Or I stopped one. By 4:31 a.m., the rain had become a solid roar on the windows, and the bullpen beyond the glass moved with brittle urgency, heads turning toward their room and then away again, as if everyone could feel the line being crossed, but nobody wanted to be seen seeing it. Cade reached across the table and grabbed her right wrist, fingers clamping over tendon and bone hard enough to spark pain up her forearm. He pulled her halfway out of the chair, close enough that his cuff brushed her sleeve. "People vanish in this city without headlines," he said in a low, precise whisper. "They miss one payment, sign one wrong page, and the system forgets they existed. Do you understand me?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. She tried to twist free, but the room tilted, white light smearing at the edges. She had not eaten. She had worked 18 hours. A rushing static filled her ears until his words became fragments. "Let go," she said, but it came out thin. Cade released her wrist, only to snatch the terminal toward him, stabbing at keys. The lock icon remained. He hit escape, then a hidden function menu, then escape again, each motion tighter than the last. "Why isn't this clearing?" he muttered. "Because it's archived," she whispered. He looked up, and what sat in his face now was not polished authority, but raw calculation. He reached for her again, this time catching the side of her arm near the elbow where bruises would hide under sleeves. Lily jerked back. A sharp pain knifed through her shoulder, the one the table edge had caught earlier in the week lifting supply boxes at St. Jude's. Her vision tunneled. She tried to plant both feet and stand, but her knees trembled violently, and the cold in the room seemed to spike straight through her soaked scrub top. Outside, an alarm chirped once from a nearby console. Then again, longer, as if acknowledging a flagged file transfer. Cade swore under his breath and moved toward the door panel, maybe to cut power, maybe to call someone. Lily pushed herself up from the chair to follow, to get into the corridor where people could see. But the floor dropped out from under her balance. She caught the table with one palm. Her other shoulder struck the metal edge, sending a burst of pain down her arm. Then sound fractured. Footsteps. A door opening hard enough to rebound off its stop. Men's voices layered in clipped commands she couldn't separate. She saw him first as silhouette through the bright spill from the corridor. Tall, broad at the shoulders, black suit cut with severe precision, movement controlled even at speed. Enzo Marcelli entered without entourage fanfare. Yet the room's energy snapped around him, as if authority itself had crossed the threshold. His gaze went to Lily immediately, took in her half-fallen posture, her gray face, Cade's position too close to her chair, the red pressure marks already rising on her wrist. "What happened?" Enzo asked. No one answered fast enough. Lily tried to straighten, to say she was fine long enough to avoid becoming another liability on someone else's list. But her hearing narrowed to a distant hum, and the fluorescent light became a hard white tunnel. Her knees gave. The table corner slammed her shoulder as she folded, and then she was falling toward tile. She never hit it. Arms caught her mid-drop, one behind her back, one under her knees, lifting with controlled strength that felt both unyielding and careful. Wool and clean soap, not cedar and coffee. Enzo's voice came above her, low and level, carrying through the room. "Medic team, now." He turned without setting her down. "Lock this floor." A guard answered from the corridor. "Yes, sir." "Pull all interview footage and live feed copies from 4:15 forward." "Already in progress." Lily's cheek rested against crisp shirt fabric under his open jacket. The world lurched with each step as he carried her through the glass door into the corridor, and staff parted instantly conversations cutting off mid-word. She caught fragments. She collapsed. Get Dr. Velez. Compliance pinged executive. Enzo did not break stride. Clear the east elevator. No stops. Behind them, Cade's voice rose, strained but still trying for polished control. Mr. Marcelli, this is a misread. She interfered with... Be quiet, Enzo said, and his voice was barely contained steel. They reached the elevator bay. A medic knelt beside Lily the moment Enzo lowered her onto a gurney that had appeared as if summoned out of air. Cuff on her arm, penlight in her eyes. Rapid questions she tried to answer through the cotton in her mouth. Any chest pain? When did you last eat? Are you on anticoagulants? She managed. No. Yesterday. No. And saw the medic's expression tighten at the timeline. Enzo stood at her shoulder, one hand on the rail, eyes never leaving her face. Rain streaked the far windows in silver lines behind him. He spoke to the security chief without looking away. Detain Detective Cade pending tribunal review. Disarm him. No private calls. A beat of stunned silence then. Understood, sir. Cade came into view at the end of the corridor, flanked by two officers, jaw clenched, trying to keep composure as one removed his access badge and sidearm in full sight of staff who had deferred to him an hour earlier. You can't do this on allegation, he said sharply. I have authority. Enzo turned his head just enough for Cade to hear every word. You had authority. You used it to assault a contractor and manipulate evidence under my roof. His gaze cut back to Lily, then returned to Cade with a finality that chilled the air more than the overactive vents. You're fired. On camera. Effective now. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and as the medics rolled Lily inside, she saw Cade's face strip of color while a red recording light blinked above the corridor camera, capturing everything he no longer controlled. The elevator doors sealed, and the car dropped into a private ascent that felt almost motionless, except for the pressure building in Lily's ears and the tremor she could not stop in her hands. A medic tightened the blood pressure cuff and watched the digital readout climb, then reset it and took it again as if she needed proof. Another peeled back Lily's damp coat, cut the sleeve seam with blunt trauma shears, and exposed the bruising already darkening around her wrist. Enzo stood at the head of the gurney with one hand braced on the rail, shoulders squared against the steel wall, speaking into a secure phone in short, exact chains. Penthouse Medical Suite. Full team. Hematology panel. Tox screen. Electrolyte panel. Cardiac monitoring. Alert legal to preserve all footage from security level 52. No edits. No delays. He listened for 2 seconds, eyes on Lily's face. And lock contractor payroll access. Every emergency disbursement touched by Cade gets frozen and traced. Lily tried to focus on the medic's voice, asking for her date of birth, allergies, last meal. But words kept thinning at the edges. Her mouth tasted like copper. Her left shoulder burned where it had struck steel, then table, then whatever came after that. She could feel Enzo's presence more than she could see him. A field of controlled force holding the small moving space together, while alarms and footsteps and doors all happened somewhere behind the elevator's sealed walls. When the medic asked, "Any chance you're pregnant?" she forced her head side to side. No. When asked, "Any diagnosed blood disorder?" she said, "Anemia. Old." The medic's pen paused. Treated? Lily stared at the ceiling lights and answered the truth anyway. Not lately. At 4:42 a.m., the elevator opened directly into a corridor lined with matte limestone, recessed lighting, and armed security already waiting in 2 ranks. The contrast hit even through her haze. Downstairs had been surveillance and polished intimidation. Up here, wealth had gone quieter, almost austere, with museum still air and soundproof doors that shut out the storm. Enzo stepped out first and cut through the formation without slowing. No unauthorized staff passed this threshold. Visitor logs sealed. Anyone who entered interview Suite A between 4:15 and 4:35 is held for statement. He looked at the security chief, a gray-haired man Lily remembered from intake protocol. "Rossi, rotate in personnel from outside Cade's chain. I want clean hands on this." Rossi nodded once. "Already underway, sir." The penthouse medical suite door opened before they reached it. Dr. Velez, compact and unsmiling in navy scrubs, met them with 2 nurses and a portable ultrasound cart parked against the wall. "Bed 3, she said, then glanced at Enzo. "Out of my way, unless you're helping." He moved back 1 step, no argument, and helped transfer Lily with a precision that made it clear he had done emergency logistics before, maybe too many times. Warm blankets came first, then adhesive leads across her chest, pulse oximeter clipped to her finger, IV line in her left arm. The room smelled of antiseptic and cedar from the cabinetry, with rain rattling softly against triple-glazed windows on the far side. Every surface was expensive and spotless. Every motion around her was brisk, practiced, unsentimental. "Lily, stay with me," Dr. Velez said, shining a light across her pupils. "You collapsed after prolonged exertion and acute stress. We need a full picture. Chest pain now?" "No." "Breathlessness?" "A little." "Any bleeding, black stools, fainting in the last month?" "Lightheaded. Not this bad." Dr. Velez pressed 2 fingers at Lily's neck, then checked the monitor. "BP unstable, pulse high. Start fluids. Draw CBC, ferritin, iron saturation, CMP, magnesium, troponin. Add lactate." She looked over at Enzo without softening her tone. "If this becomes a legal spectacle in my room, I will remove everyone but staff." "It won't," he said. "You have full authority here." "Good. Then stop asking for updates every 30 seconds. One of the nurses cleaned Lily's wrist marks with cool saline and photographed them with a time-stamped clinical camera. "For medical record," she said quietly, reading Lily's flinch. "And if legal requests certified copies." Lily nodded. Across the room, Rossi handed Enzo a tablet. Enzo scanned it, jaw tight. "Cade is in containment interview room 2. Counsel requested. Denied until anti-corruption transfer acknowledges custody." He tapped the screen. "Send confirmation to compliance and to external prosecutors now. I want receipt numbers logged." Rossi hesitated. "At this hour, the duty line may—" Enzo cut in, voice low and final. "Then wake who needs waking." The nurse near Lily's shoulder adjusted the blanket and asked, "Any family we should call?" Lily's eyes snapped open fully for the first time since the elevator. "My brother, Sami. He has dialysis at 6:30. He'll panic if I miss pickup messages." She tried to push up, pain flashing through her shoulder. "My phone's in a lockbox downstairs." Enzo crossed to the bed, stopping where she could see him without craning her neck. "You're not moving yet. Give me the number." She stared at him, mistrust and need colliding hard enough to make her chest tighten. His voice lowered a fraction. "You can listen while I make the call." She recited Sami's clinic extension from memory, each digit a lifeline she had memorized through repetition and fear. Enzo put the call on speaker. The line rang 4 times before a tired administrator answered with scripted caution. "Overnight nephrology support." Enzo gave his name, title, and a direct callback code that made the tone on the other end sharpen instantly. I need nurse supervisor Marlene Ortiz on this line now regarding patient Sami Hassan. 30 seconds later, another voice came on, brisk and wary. This is Ortiz. Lily swallowed against the dryness in her throat. It's me. I'm okay. I got held at work. Lily? Relief cracked through professional restraint. He's stable. He asked for you twice. We still need that guardianship update by Friday. I know. I'm handling it. Enzo spoke before Ortiz could sign off. Ms. Ortiz, this is Enzo Marcelli. Effective immediately, all outstanding co-pays for Sami Hassan will be guaranteed by my office pending legal review, with no interruption in care. You'll receive written confirmation within the hour. Silence, then cautious disbelief. Sir, we can't accept verbal assurances. You won't need to. My legal director will email and fax signed guarantee letters with reference numbers tied to your billing department. Confirm the destination addresses. Ortiz did. Rossi, already beside him, typed the details into the tablet. Lily listened to them exchange protocol language she usually translated for other frightened families, and for a moment the room tilted in a different way. Not safer, not yet, but less cornered. When the call ended, Dr. Vélez accepted a lab printout from the nurse and read it once, then again. Her expression hardened into clinical focus. Hemoglobin is 6.9, she said. Ferritin severely depleted, iron saturation critically low. She didn't just skip lunch. This is chronic. She turned to Lily. How long have you been this exhausted? Lily stared at the blanket folded over her legs. Enzo's dark suit jacket draped across it from the elevator like an accidental claim she had not agreed to accept. Months. Why no treatment? Copays. Time-off penalties. If I miss shifts, I lose weekend differential. If I lose that, rent goes. Her voice roughened. And Sammy's meds come first. Dr. Vélez held her gaze. You were close to cardiac strain. Another collapse in the wrong place could have ended very differently. Across the room, Enzo said nothing. But something in his posture changed, the stillness growing denser rather than calmer. He asked Dr. Vélez, immediate plan. IV iron starts now. Cross-match blood, 1 unit if symptoms worsen or pressure drops again. Strict monitoring for 12 hours. No return to work this week. She won't return to any shift until you clear her, Enzo said. Lily turned her head toward him, despite the ache. You don't decide that. His eyes met hers, dark and steady. Tonight, I decide whether the people who hurt you get another chance. Your employment choices remain yours when you can stand without collapsing. The distinction landed in the space between them, sharp but not cruel. Lily looked away first, more from fatigue than surrender. By 5:08 a.m., rain had eased from pounding sheets to a steady hiss against the glass, and the sweet lights had dimmed to a softer setting while monitors continued their indifferent rhythm. The worst of the dizziness receded under fluids and warmth, leaving behind a deep, shaking exhaustion that felt like her body finally collecting debts she had postponed for a year. A nurse helped her sip water through a straw. Another brought a tray with broth, crackers, and a banana sliced into even coins. Lily ate slowly, each swallow almost painful in its normality. Rossi returned with a folder, placed it on a side table, and addressed Enzo in formal cadence. External contact outcomes, sir. Anti-corruption duty prosecutor accepted transfer request at 4:58. Reference number logged. Compliance archive confirms receipt of locked metadata packet from Suite A at 4:31 with full integrity hash. Payroll access audit initiated. Emergency welfare account discrepancy currently estimated at $212,000. Preliminary trail links to Cade's authorization keys and 2 shell vendors. Lily stopped chewing. Welfare account? Her voice came out thin. Rossi glanced at Enzo, then answered her directly. Employee Emergency Assistance Fund, medical support, temporary housing, family crisis grants. She felt cold despite the blankets. I filed 3 requests this year. 1 denied for incomplete documents. 2 marked pending. Rossi opened the folder, checked a sheet. All 3 were marked paid in the system. The spoon slipped from Lily's fingers and clinked against the tray. Paid to who? Vendor entities under investigation. Rossi's jaw tightened. Not to you. The room went very quiet, except for monitor beeps and rain. Lily pressed her palm to her eyes until stars sparked in the dark. Shame had sat on her for months, like a second skin. Missed payments, skipped prescriptions, rent notices folded and unfolded until the paper softened. Every choice narrowed to which emergency could wait. Hearing that money had existed and been diverted did not relieve the weight. It changed its shape into something hotter. I thought I was failing him, she said, voice breaking on the last word before she could flatten it. Sami kept asking why we couldn't move somewhere with an elevator that didn't stall between floors. I told him we just needed 1 more month, then another one, then another. Enzo stepped closer, but kept enough distance that she did not flinch. You were surviving theft disguised as procedure. She let out a short, unsteady breath that was almost a laugh and not remotely amused. That sounds cleaner than it felt. Dr. Velez checked the IV line and spoke more gently than before. Bodies keep score, Ms. Hassan. You carried too much for too long. Lily looked at the bruises on her wrist, at the monitor tracing her heartbeat in green lines she could not afford to ignore anymore. At Enzo standing in a room built to withstand siege while she had been rationing bus fare and iron pills. The class divide was still there, brutal and obvious. Marble against peeling paint, protocol against pleading. But another truth sat beside it now. Someone had used that divide as cover, and she had caught the seam before he could erase it. She lifted her chin a fraction. I want copies of every record tied to my requests. Denials, approvals, signatures, transfer logs. Not summaries, originals. Enzo nodded once. You'll have them. And I want independent counsel before I give full testimony map. You'll have that too. She held his gaze, testing for the trap she had learned to expect. He did not look away. No off-book deals, no verbal promises. Written only, he said, filed and enforceable. For the first time since the interrogation room, Lily felt her breathing settle into something close to steady. Not trust, not forgiveness. Structure, terms. Ground under her feet that did not shift with someone else's smile. Rossi's earpiece clicked. He listened, then spoke toward Enzo. Sir, prosecutors are on secure line requesting immediate transfer authorization for Cade. They also request statement from the victim regarding visible injuries. Enzo looked at Lily, waiting rather than answering for her. She swallowed, felt the ache in her shoulder and the sting in her wrist, and nodded. I'll give it. From here, with legal witness present. Enzo turned to Rossi. Arrange it. No one enters without her consent. As Rossi moved to execute the order, Dr. Velez adjusted Lily's blanket and started the iron infusion, dark fluid threading down clear tubing into Lily's arm. Outside, dawn began to thin the storm clouds over lower Manhattan, turning the rain-streaked windows from black mirror to muted gray. Lily watched the color change and understood that the night had not broken her in the way Cade intended. It had exposed the ledger. Now she intended to make every stolen line item visible. Now she intended to make every stolen line item visible, even if naming each one meant standing inside the same machinery that had nearly crushed her. The infusion pump clicked in quiet intervals beside her bed, and Lily tracked the sound to keep her breathing even while Rossi stepped into the corridor to assemble legal witness access. Enzo remained where he was, close enough that she could ask for him without raising her voice, far enough that she never had to flinch from him. That distance was new. In her world, men with power either pressed in until there was no room left or disappeared when help cost them something. He had done neither, and the resulting tension unsettled her more than shouting ever had. A nurse adjusted the blanket around her knees and asked whether she wanted additional pain control for her shoulder. Lily shook her head. She wanted a clear mind when prosecutors heard her name. Dr. Velez signed off on a remote forensic intake with strict limits, then pointed at Lily as if issuing an order to a stubborn trainee. If your vision narrows again, you stop speaking. If your pulse spikes above threshold, I end the session. You are not useful to anyone unconscious. Lily gave a tired nod. Understood. Enzo watched Dr. Velez leave, and then spoke without ceremony. My legal director found an independent attorney willing to come in now. Arabic speaker. No ties to my companies. Name? Nadia Rahal. Civil rights and labor coercion cases. Lily studied his face for a trap, found only fatigue around his eyes and a controlled stillness that looked closer to restraint than strategy. You picked someone who'd fight you if needed. I picked someone you might trust more than me. The honesty of it landed hard. Her pulse monitor jumped 3 beats. She hated that her body betrayed every shift in emotion on a green line anyone in the room could read. By 5:34 a.m., the eastern edge of the sky had gone from steel gray to diluted pearl behind the rain-streaked glass, and the penthouse hallway filled with quiet motion as legal staff arrived in dark coats, signed layered confidentiality forms, and surrendered devices at a checkpoint Rossi had set outside the medical suite. Nadia Rahal entered 5 minutes later, carrying a leather folio, rain still glistening on her sleeves. She looked to be in her 40s, sharp-eyed, composed, her dark hair pinned back with practical precision. She greeted Lily first, not Enzo. Ms. Hassan, I represent you and only you unless you terminate that relationship in writing, Nadia said, placing her card on the bedside table where Lily could see it. I reviewed the preliminary facts on the ride over. We'll set boundaries now, then you speak. Lily exhaled slowly, a release she hadn't allowed herself all night. Thank you for coming. Nadia glanced at Enzo. Mr. Marcelli, with your permission, I need 2 minutes alone with my client. Enzo nodded once and stepped out with Rossi, the door clicking shut behind them. The room felt instantly less charged and oddly colder. Nadia sat in the chair beside the bed, voice low and exact. You have leverage because records were preserved. Do not give that away with vague language. Answer only what is asked. If they ask about motive, name facts, not shame. If they ask why you took this job, you say, to support dependent family medical care while managing wage instability. You do not apologize for poverty. Lily looked down at her taped IV line and swallowed around the knot in her throat. He read my bills out loud in front of staff. I know. Nadia's expression did not soften into pity. It sharpened into purpose. Humiliation is a control tactic. We are done participating in it. When Enzo and Rossi returned, the remote statement setup was ready. Encrypted tablet on an articulated arm. 2 external prosecutors on secure video. 1 court reporter. one trauma-informed advocate, and chain of custody documentation displayed in the corner of the screen. Nadia stood at the head of the bed, like a shield with paperwork. The first prosecutor, Deputy Counsel Ingrid Vale, spoke in clipped, formal cadence. Ms. Hassan, do you consent to recorded testimony regarding coercion, evidence tampering, payroll diversion, and physical intimidation by former internal investigator Darius Cade? I consent, Lily said. State conditions for your participation. Lily kept her gaze on the camera, not on the men in the room. Independent counsel present. Medical supervision maintained. No direct contact with Darius Cade. No off-record questioning. Certified copies of my statement to my counsel within 12 hours. Vale nodded. Conditions accepted and entered. As questioning began, Lily felt the old fear rise again, a familiar constriction in her throat that told her to make herself smaller, less troublesome, easier to dismiss. At the same time, she could sense Enzo just beyond her right shoulder, silent, immovable, a line of force she did not ask for and could not ignore. Fear and attraction tangled in a way that made her angrier than either emotion alone. She wanted his protection. She did not want to need it. Ms. Hassan, Vale said, describe the moment you initiated metadata preservation. Lily recited the sequence precisely. Terminal menu path, reason code, red banner confirming queued duplicate, Cade's immediate demand to delete. Her voice shook once when she described his hand on her wrist, then steadied when Nadia touched 2 fingers to the bedrail in a quiet, grounding rhythm. The second prosecutor asked, what threat language did he use? He said people vanish without headlines, Lily replied. He tied that warning to my debts and to my brother's dependency. Did you perceive that as a threat to your safety? Yes. Did you perceive that as a threat to your brother's stability? Yes. After 38 minutes, Dr. Velez held up a hand and ended the session for vitals. Vale accepted the pause and confirmed next steps. Formal affidavit drafting, forensic review of welfare fund transactions, and transfer acknowledgement for Cade within the hour. External contact outcome logged. No ambiguity. The call terminated, and silence settled across the room in a dense, exhausted layer. Nadia turned to Lily. You did well. You were specific and credible. I'll stay on site until the affidavit is signed. Will they actually prosecute? Lily asked. Nadia gave a measured answer. Evidence suggests a strong case, especially with archive integrity and clinical documentation. A primary consideration is whether internal witnesses cooperate quickly. Your statement increased that likelihood. When Nadia stepped into the hall to take a secure call, Lily finally looked at Enzo directly. He had removed his tie, collar open now, but the rest of him remained controlled, built from decisions and consequences. She noticed the faint crease between his brows, the way his hands stayed loose at his sides unless someone mentioned her brother, the way his gaze dropped to her bruised wrist and then shifted away, as if he refused to let pain become spectacle. You keep doing that, she said quietly. Doing what? Standing there like I'm both evidence and something else. His jaw tightened, then eased. You are a witness under my protection, and you are a woman who was harmed in my building. Both are true. Protection from you or through you. The question lingered. Rain hissed against glass. Somewhere down the corridor, a scanner beeped as another staff badge was revoked. Enzo stepped closer, not touching her. I won't ask for trust you haven't chosen. I will give you structure you can verify. She held his gaze, pulse climbing again for reasons she did not want to name. You say that like contracts can fix fear. They can limit where fear gets to operate. That answer should have sounded cold. Instead, it sounded like someone who had learned tenderness only through logistics. Doors locked, names logged, funds released, lines drawn and enforced. Lily hated how much that moved her. Rossi knocked once and entered with a slim black folder. Internal Tribunal convenes in Conference Hall B at 6:27. Medical clearance for limited appearance was granted if Ms. Hassan remained seated and monitored. Cade requested to face accuser directly. Request denied. Nadia re-entered behind him and took the folder first. We attend under my conditions. My client speaks once for the internal record, and then no further questions without my approval. Enzo nodded. Accepted. Rossi hesitated, then added, Cade is contesting dismissal authority and claiming the contractor fabricated distress to obstruct inquiry. Lily felt heat rise fast and sharp, cutting through fatigue. He said that. Rossi met her eyes. Yes. Nadia snapped the folder shut. Then he just strengthened malicious coercion exposure. At 6:02 a.m., after fresh vitals, a shoulder brace, and another half-cup of broth she forced down despite nausea, Lily was wheeled through the penthouse corridor toward a secure elevator reserved for executive hearings. She insisted on sitting upright, not reclining. Nadia walked on one side with notes. Enzo walked on the other, silent as a storm front held in check. The elevator ride lasted less than a minute. Yet Lily felt each floor as a small descent into the place where power liked to call itself neutral. Conference Hall B was built like a private courtroom. Walnut panels, frosted partitions, 2 tiers of seating, and a central table beneath recessed lights that flattened every expression. Security glass divided the witness area from the respondent position. Cade sat behind that barrier, in a plain dark suit with no badge, no sidearm, no smile left except the thin reflex of one. His right leg bounced once under the table before he stilled it. Around him sat auditors, 2 compliance officers, and a tribunal chair with a silver pen poised over an embossed ledger. Lily was positioned behind her own glass panel with a mic and water. Dr. Velez's nurse stood just outside frame, monitoring her numbers on a portable screen. Nadia took the seat beside her. Enzo remained at the center table, not seated, hands braced on the polished wood. The tribunal chair opened with formality, citing protocol breaches under internal code and acknowledging concurrent external prosecution review. Then she invited preliminary statements. Cade spoke first, voice polished almost back to normal. This contractor overreached her authorization, inserted false procedural flags, and staged physical distress when challenged. Any force was incidental to preventing data compromise. Lily's stomach turned. The old instinct to shrink returned with brutal force, but Nadia leaned in and murmured, "Facts, not fear." Enzo lifted his head, and when he spoke, the room seemed to narrow around the sound. "You do not refer to her as this contractor. Her name is Lily Hassan." Cade gave a small, incredulous laugh. "With respect, sir, you're emotionally compromised." Enzo's voice stayed low, barely contained. "No, I am administratively clear. You forged manifests, redirected welfare funds, and used dependency data to coerce compliance. You used my name to prey on the vulnerable." Cade leaned toward his mic. "Allegations." "Corroborated," Enzo said. "Archive hash confirmed, payroll trace confirmed. Clinical injury documentation time-stamped during your custody window." He held Cade's gaze without blinking. "You lost the right to stand in my house and call cruelty procedure." The tribunal chair turned to Lily. "Ms. Hassan, One statement for internal record. Lily adjusted the mic with unsteady fingers and felt the brace pull against her shoulder. She looked at Cade through the glass and finally understood what had changed. He still had a voice, but he no longer controlled the frame around it. You targeted me because I was tired, broke, and responsible for someone you thought gave you leverage, she said. Her voice strengthened with each sentence. You read my private bills to a room to make me smaller. You touched me to make me afraid. You marked funds as paid while families went without. That wasn't an investigation. It was theft with a badge. Cade opened his mouth. Enzo cut him off with 2 words that landed like a lock, engaging. Not now. Then, in front of auditors, security chiefs, legal counsel, and the glass that recorded every movement, Enzo drew the line that would govern everything after. From this point forward, any matter touching Lily Hassan goes through counsel and compliance only. She is under my protection, and that protection is procedural, financial, and physical. No contact, no intermediaries, no exceptions. Do you understand me? Cade stared back, color draining from his face as the tribunal chair entered the directive into record and read it aloud for enforcement. For the first time all night, Lily felt fear loosen its grip by a single, measurable degree. For the first time all night, Lily felt fear loosen its grip by a single, measurable degree. And the tribunal moved with the cold precision of a machine that had finally received the right input. The chair asked for final verification from compliance, and a woman in a steel gray suit stood to read from a tablet, each sentence clipped and exact. The metadata lock she had filed at 4:31 had reached executive archives intact. The interview room footage had no gaps from 4:15 onward. The payroll audit traced emergency welfare disbursements to shell vendors controlled through Darius Cade's credentials. Clinical photographs of Lily's wrist were time-stamped and matched the custody window. When the chair called for disposition, no one asked for recess. Termination for cause is upheld, she said. Immediate permanent expulsion from all Marcelli operations is entered. External anti-corruption transfer proceeds under prior authorization. She turned toward Lily behind the glass. Ms. Hassan, your internal immunity for procedural breach during preservation action is granted in full. You acted within compliance Rule 12. Cade sat very still through most of it, but his composure fractured at the words permanent expulsion. You're making a public sacrifice out of me, he said, voice tightening. This is optics. Enzo did not raise his volume. This is consequence. 2 security officers stepped to Cade's position as the tribunal clerk read out the transfer code and custody receipt number into record. The red light over the camera remained on. Cade looked once toward Lily with that same polished expression he had worn in reception, only thinner now, stripped of certainty. You won't survive this world on paperwork, he said through the glass, trying for menace and landing on bitterness. Nadia leaned into Lily's mic and spoke first. Strike the respondent's intimidation attempt. The chair nodded. Stricken. She signaled the officers. Remove him. Cade was escorted out through the side door where badge revocations were processed. Lily watched until he disappeared into the fortified corridor, then watched a clerk place his confiscated access card and sidearm into separate evidence bags with printed seals. Physical chain of custody complete. No one in the room pretended the system had become pure overnight. It had done one thing correctly, and everyone could feel how much labor that had required. By 7:10 a.m., rain had thinned to a mist that turned the tower windows pearled and pale. Lily was wheeled back to the medical suite with Nadia beside her and Enzo walking a measured pace on her other side, speaking into his phone only when necessary. "Confirm prosecutor intake signature," he said. "I want the second acknowledgement, not just dispatch acceptance." He listened, then, "Good. Send copy to Miss Rahal first, then to my legal archive." External contact outcome resolved. In the suite, Rossi laid a hard case on the table and opened it under camera. "Recovered personal property from intake lockbox," he said. "Lily's powered-down phone, her state ID, her transit card, her keys, and the folded red rent notice were each scanned and returned to her hand in sequence." She touched the envelope with 2 fingers, then set it aside. Dr. Velez checked her monitor, approved oral meds, and signed a 1-page fitness note allowing legal paperwork while seated. Nadia arranged documents across Lily's blanket like a controlled battlefield. "Read line 12 twice," she said. "That's your independent reporting right. If they retaliate, you go to prosecutors directly." The contract offered a protected role overseeing multilingual compliance audits across affiliated operations. Salary listed in numbers Lily had only seen on hospital fundraising posters, with mandatory meal breaks, medical coverage, and capped hours written as enforceable terms rather than goodwill promises. A separate addendum covered Sammy. Secure 2-bedroom housing under a family protection lease, dialysis transport, and direct payment to clinic accounts through a monitored trust with third-party oversight. Lily read each page slowly while her infusion pump clicked. Enzo stood at the window and did not interrupt. When she reached the immunity clause, she looked up. "This states no civil penalty from your companies for any data action tied to preserving evidence tonight," she said. "It does," Nadia answered, "and it survives leadership changes." Lily signed, then initialed each page. Enzo signed after her, then slid the packet to Nadia, who countersigned and scanned each document into a secure drive in front of them all. Physical evidence and legal papers accounted for. Stored, duplicated. A soft knock came from the door. Rossi entered with the young valet Lily had seen all night, now in a dry uniform jacket, bruises still visible along his knuckles and wrist. He held his cap in both hands. "Ms. Hassan," Rossi said, "this is Nico Bell. He requested to address you with counsel present." Nico swallowed hard. "I gave my statement," he said, voice rough with nerves. "The thing you heard dragged in Suite A was a portable server case. Cade had me move it off inventory path and told me not to log it. I didn't know why at first. Then he told me if I talked, my probation file would get corrected and I'd lose my job and housing. The bruises, that was from him grabbing me near Loading 3 earlier this week." The strange details clicked into place with almost painful clarity. Shaking hand, bruised knuckles, single heavy scrape across tile, silence after. Lily nodded once. "Thank you for saying it on record." Nico looked at Enzo and then at the floor. "I should have reported sooner." "You reported now," Lily said. "That matters." Rossi handed Nadia a printed statement receipt with Nico's witness code and prosecutor acknowledgement number. External witness thread resolved. Nico gave Lily one brief, grateful look and left with his shoulders a little less bent. At 8:02 a.m., Lily used her returned phone for the first unmonitored call of the night. Nurse Ortiz answered on the second ring. "Ms. Hassan, we received the guarantee letters and billing references," she said, brisk and amazed at once. "Transport for Sammy is confirmed for this morning. Social Services Liaison says guardianship paperwork can be completed at your new address by noon." Lily closed her eyes for a moment. "Thank you for holding his slot." Ortiz's tone softened. "He kept asking if your shift was finally over." "It is now." When the call ended, Nadia handed her another receipt. Prosecutors sent certified copy timing. Your statement packet arrives in 9 hours, 40 minutes. She allowed herself the faintest smile. They are moving fast because the archive trail is clean. The move happened under gray morning light and strict protocol. Not in montage, not in abstraction. 2 vetted drivers from medical transport met Lily and Enzo at a private service entrance, while Rossi supervised luggage transfer. 1 duffel from her old apartment retrieved by a female security officer and inventoried in her presence. 1 backpack of Sammy's dialysis supplies from clinic storage. 1 plastic dinosaur tucked into an outer pocket. Lily rode in the rear seat with a shoulder brace and a thermos of broth Dr. Velez insisted she finish. Enzo sat across from her in the facing seat, jacket off, sleeves rolled, speaking only when needed. Downtown traffic crawled through wet streets as building facades shifted from old brick and scaffolding to a quieter block with guarded entry and working elevators that did not shudder between floors. Sami was waiting in the lobby with Nurse Ortiz and a social worker, backpack hanging from one shoulder, headphones around his neck. He saw Lily and ran the last few steps, stopping short when he noticed the wrist bruises and medical tape. "Did work hurt you?" he asked, 11 years old and trying to sound older. Lily knelt as far as her shoulder allowed and pulled him close. "Work is over for now." He leaned back to inspect her face. "Are we in trouble?" "No." She held his gaze until he believed her. "We're in paperwork." He made a small, dramatic groan that startled a tired laugh out of her. Ortiz reviewed medication schedule, transport times, and emergency contacts at the kitchen counter of the new apartment, while the social worker completed guardianship updates with Nadia on speaker. Every call ended with a confirmation number, each number written in 2 places. Lily watched the rain bead on the balcony glass and listened to cabinet doors close in a home that did not smell like mold and radiator dust. By 10:46 a.m., after Sammy had eaten and fallen asleep on the new sofa with his dinosaur under one arm, Lily stood at the window in borrowed slippers and Enzo's suit jacket still draped around her shoulders against the chill. Enzo joined her, leaving a respectful half-step of space. The city below looked washed and sharp, delivery trucks threading wet avenues, people beginning ordinary days that had no idea what had broken and been repaired overnight. "You can walk away from all of this after recovery," he said. "Contract has an exit clause, no penalties." Lily watched a bus turn the corner, wipers beating time. "And if I stay? Then you build the system that would have protected you sooner." His voice was low, steady, with counsel, with oversight, with authority that is yours on paper and in practice. She turned toward him. "Safety still feels temporary." "It is," he said, "no false comfort. In my world, in your world, in any system with power, safety requires maintenance, audits, boundaries, people who speak when silence is cheaper." The answers settled between them, not romantic, not soft, but honest enough to stand on. Lily looked down at her wrist, where the bruises were beginning to yellow at the edges, proof that injury could change color and still remain real. She thought of the lock icon she had triggered with shaking hands, of Nico finally naming what he saw, of receipts and signatures and doors that now opened because she had refused to be reduced to a motive profile. Enzo faced the glass again and spoke without theatrical weight, almost quietly. "You answer to no one but yourself now." Lily let the words move through her, testing them against the hard architecture of the morning. Signed terms in her folder, prosecutor receipts in Nadia's email, Sami sleeping safely 10 feet away, and a job offer she could accept or decline without threat attached. Temporary did not mean false. It meant active, tended, defended. She drew a deeper breath than she had managed all night and nodded once, not as surrender, but as agreement with the work ahead.